right. Welcome back to another episode of the Progress Podcast, the podcast where we share with young people that they do have a purpose, and progress is possible for them in their lives. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Newman.
Grateful to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. I got to know Joe because I met his son, Mason, and he just had wonderful things to say about you, and because I know him, I know he's telling the truth.
Well, it's an honor when your kids have something good to say about you.
Yes, yeah. I think probably one of the most important things is the relationship we build with our families. And so we'll talk some more about that today, but also about Joe. He's had a lot of experience in his career doing marketing, doing video production and things like that. But then also really doing a lot of pioneering work in the field of mental health.
Yeah.
And building resilience, especially among young people. And so would you want to share with us just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, you bet. When I was a young man, starting out in my career, going to school, I turned to my best friend and said, hey, what do we want to do with our lives? And, in high school, we had grown up making videos, like wedding videos and music videos and these kind of things, just kind of for fun. And he's like, well, why don't we try doing that for a living? Mm-hmm. And so we're like, okay. And so we started a studio, and we did that full time for about 13 years. Started our families, and we're raising kids and, making videos. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, a lot of nights and weekends. But we're going to school at the same time for business. And, I graduated with an associate's degree in business, and I was like, I can't really justify going to school longer so that I can pay myself more, like, why do I really need a bachelor's degree?
Yeah, my employer requires this, and your employer's you.
Exactly. And so I kind of like put off the bachelor's for a while until I was about 31, 32. And I just kept getting this feeling, go back to school, you need to go back to school. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't deny it any longer. So I went and enrolled at the University of Utah and came to find out that was really easy. I was like surprised at how easy it was. And as I was going over the list of like majors to choose from, family and consumer science jumped out at me. And I was like, here I am, a business owner of 10 plus years. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe this will help me, like with psychology. I work with families, like families are my clients. And so maybe this will help me be a better, marketer to families. Well, little did I know it was actually like a sociology major, right? And I emphasize specifically in human development and family studies. Mm-hmm. Because I really loved the whole human development process. Being a father, at that time I had 4 kids. And just like seeing this process from birth to, the evolution of the brain and like the development of their like senses and cognitive abilities and everything was just really fascinating to me. And so I realized when I got in that program, I was like, okay, well, this will be helpful as a father, help me be a better dad. And so I stuck with it and came to realize I was on a track to becoming a therapist. Yeah. And it was right around the time we started studying techniques of counseling and the whole like Socratic method. Sure. Where you have to like ask them questions, leading questions so that they discover the answer within themselves. That I really realized I was not very cut out to be a therapist. Like, I'm way too much of a action-oriented kind of person. Where, like, when there's a problem and I see an obvious solution, I'm going to tell you what that solution is and stop crying about it. Go get it done. Let's go to action. Let's get this done. Okay. And then I came to find out that doesn't really work very well. Yeah. In counseling.
There's different approaches for different folks.
So I got this, bachelor's degree in human development and family studies. And I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe that's just to help me be a better dad. I don't know. A little bit of time went by and I ended up taking a job with the tourism department down here in St. George area. Mm-hmm. and they needed a content creator. And the wedding industry was kind of tanking at that time, and so we were kind of like, well, let's look for other opportunities. So I moved down here, worked for them for about 4.5 years, making all of the Greater Zion photo and video assets.
Oh, wow.
Which was a blast, because I'm an outdoor enthusiast. Like, I got to go rock climbing with cameras in my hands, right? And I got to go canyoneering into the depths of these like slot canyons with all these different cameras, and I'd produce the fun tourism highlight videos for Greater Zion, and a lot of the photos. And so that was really cool, because I got to work on like a really big scale kind of production where I had a really big budget and really wide distribution, and we had a lot of dollars to put towards advertising. So my stuff was being shown in China and Germany and the UK and in Times Square, in New York, because we would buy advertising in those areas. So easily, if you got money, you can put your face in Times Square.
Sure.
That's basically what we did. But it was kind of fun working on that big scale of a project. And then I was introduced to a mental health, a startup mental health clinic called Life Launch Centers. And they were doing some really great work with adolescents, with anxiety and depression, suicide and trauma. And all of a sudden, I saw the connection between my love for video and content creation and my love for human development. And so I became the Chief Information Officer at Life Launch Centers, bought into that partnership and created that brand, created all of our material. We developed like a video training series that would augment what we did in the clinics, and it has workbooks, and it has like the instructor's guide and a whole bunch of material.
You did what you know how to do to enhance and bring the program to life.
Exactly. I took all of my skills from a young man in the content creation world, and then had the opportunity to apply it into my passion, which is in human development, adolescent mental health.
Sure. Okay.
So.
Well, first I want to say that if I did put my face in Times Square, there'd be two prices to pay. The monetary price off the bat, and then all the children being scared. But it comes as no surprise to me what you said about how the family and consumer science stood out to you. Because I think probably the first thing I learned about you, like I said, being introduced through your son, is how much of a family man you are.
Yeah.
And how big a priority.
Since I was a kid, I remember being like 14 years old and just really wanting to be a dad. I was blessed to be in a family where, I had a really strong mother and father who were married and raised us with a lot of love and activity and adventure.
Yeah.
Basically everything I do, my dad introduced me to. And it's a great honor to be able to take some of those talents that he introduced me to and spread good in the world. And so, I always wanted to be a dad. And so I got married pretty young at 21 years old. My wife was 19.
Wow.
And we just jumped right in. It was like, let's go for this. Let's have some kids, It was really interesting doing all these sociology classes, because they would say all these things like, the longer you wait to get married, the more successful your marriage is, or the less likely you're going to get divorced. And I was like, I'm the outlier, I guess, because I actually think that it's better for kids to get married younger, like in their early 20s, before they get really set in their ways and picky. And they learn to build a companionate marriage rather than an individualistic marriage. And it really turned out to work for my wife and I. It's how my parents did it. It's how our grandparents did it. There's a lot of competing ideology out there right now, trying to buck the trend of established principles, tried and true principles, looking for some new, better way. And, I think when we look at the current socioeconomic indicators out there, or not socioeconomic, but all this social indicators out there, we're not doing better. You know, like adolescents today are not happier than they've ever been.
Right. Divorce rates are not lower.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not making improvements. We're kind of, you know.
It's interesting because, and the timing of this episode is perfect for our listeners. We've just all celebrated Thanksgiving, and it's a huge family holiday. And maybe the one thing we could say about all families is that they're unique. There's not one way that a family is going to operate. There's so many different social dynamics and things involved. But one thing that maybe we could say that we share among all different groups is a love for our families.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating. Around, like it's a human trait.
Yeah.
That around the world in all these different cultures, you know, parents love their children. Children, you know, it's a struggle raising them. And hopefully you come out at the end with a good relationship between parent and child. And those really are the most fulfilling things you can do in life.
Yeah. I'd love for us to hear some of your thoughts and some of your philosophy behind the Life Launch Centers and things you learned about resilience, especially in today's technology-saturated world. But first, would you be willing just to share with our listeners how many kids you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 9 kids. That was quite the evolution there. You know, when we first got married, I was kind of joking with my wife, and I was like, "So, how many kids do you want to have?" You know, and she's like, "I don't know." She came from a family of 7 kids. I came from a family of 7 kids, and she's like, "How many do you want?" And so just to kind of like test her a little bit, I was like, "I don't know." I was thinking like maybe a dozen. And she's like, "Okay." And I was like, whoa, wait.
Not phased at all.
Yeah, she wasn't phased at all, because I realized like having kids, it's way more her input than mine. Like she has to devote a whole lot more resources to raising the children than I do. And so it's totally up to her. But I was like, I was just kidding, you know. I was thinking like, you know, 7 or so.
Sure.
You know, like our parents did. And she was like, yeah, maybe 7. And then we kind of talked about 10. But anyway, yeah, we ended up kind of working our way one at a time. No twins or anything. Ended up with 7 kids, and then we kept getting some feelings like maybe there was a couple more. And so I went to her and asked her, and she, you know, she's like, okay, yeah, let's think about it, let's pray about it.
Yeah.
And finally came upon her own feelings that, yeah, we should have a couple more. And so, yeah, we're at 9. And I think we reached our breaking point.
Yeah, this is the...
Yeah, I mean, I'm 44, she's 41, and we're like, oh man, it's a good reason why you have kids when you're young.
Yeah, good thing you started early.
Yeah. We basically have 3 families, you know, it's like in groups, like the first 4 were a family, the second 3 were a family, and another 2 there at the end. Anyway.
Yeah, well, what a privilege to... the family is really an essential unit of society and of healthy, thriving societies. And what a place to learn. Yeah. I'm sure with each child, they've taught you different lessons, and vice versa. They've been able to learn different things from you. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a great blessing. What are some of the things that you would share with parents today who are concerned about having children or how they're going to raise their children, especially with regard to technology?
Okay, this is a huge discussion, and I have a lot to say about this. And I think it's because we have had such amazing success with our kids. And it wasn't because we followed what current parenting culture tells you. Current parenting culture tells you that you need to be over-involved in your kids' lives. Tells you that you need to give them everything and eliminate all difficulty from their lives. And that's exactly opposite of resilience. You know, I think it comes from a lot of my own personal upbringing. I was born into this world with crossed eyes. And I had a surgery when I was just 1.5 years old, and I wore glasses since the time I was 1.5 years old. And I had this lazy eye. And both of them were lazy. It was just whichever one I was looking out of, the other one would go, you know,
sure,
crooked or whatever. So it was kind of I was the brunt of a lot of bullying growing up. And, it was difficult, but I had to become resilient. I was forced to become resilient. And I don't think my parents even really knew how bad it was, because I really kind of sucked it up and just kind of, didn't let it take over me. But there were lots and lots of times I felt really bad about myself.
Yeah, starting from such a young age, that would certainly have some impact on you.
Yeah. In fact, I tell my wife this, and she kind of laughs about it because she thinks it's ridiculous, but I have this deep-seated trigger of feeling like I'm ugly. And, she laughs about it because she thinks I'm, a pretty good-looking guy.
Yeah.
She doesn't understand how I could even feel that way. But all my life, I've been very insecure about how I look. And, every time I look in the mirror, I have to, reassure myself that I look okay.
Sure.
And I even got criticized of that as a kid. Maybe I was vain. I got some friends that are like, you always look at yourself in the mirror. And it's like, well, it's because I'm trying to reassure myself that I'm not ugly.
Yeah. For our listeners today who are viewing through the video, you guys go ahead and let Joe know that he's a good looking, he's a handsome fella.
Well, it turned out okay, luckily. I found a very beautiful wife, but that just beginning to my life where I was bullied a lot about it. Really until it really happened. It was really bad until about the 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And in the 9th grade, I started wrestling, and suddenly the bullies disappeared. I don't know why. I remember getting to the high school in 10th grade. 9th grade was at the middle school. And all those bullies who were a year older than me, all of a sudden, they didn't want to mess with me anymore. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of room to gain some of my own confidence. But yeah, I realized from that really young age, I had to become resilient because I had a lot of thoughts about wanting to disappear, not wanting to be alive, and all these suicidal thoughts. And just the world would be better off without me. And being number 6 of 7 kids, you kind of blend into the mix anyway.
That's really hard.
But instead of choosing that, I chose talent. Right? So everybody's like, oh, wow, you're so talented, because I sing, I play the guitar, I play the piano, I play the drums, I play lots of different musical instruments. I'm a photographer, I wakeboard, I rock climb, I do lots of physical things. I love acrobatics. I do a lot of different flips and things, handsprings. And so everybody's like, oh, you're so talented. But really what it was, I think, is I was trying to find meaning in my life by achievement.
Sure.
And so I would find something that people admired, like playing the piano, and I'd put in the time and effort to learn it, right? And, talent, I don't know if people think it means you're just naturally gifted at that or something, but what they don't see are the hours and hours of practice and effort.
Seems like almost as a defense mechanism in your case. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
To kind of prove my worth to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe even to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, growing up with this difficult upbringing and a natural resilience, it wasn't until I really came into Life Launch Centers and learned, principles of dialectical behavior therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy and a lot of the neuroscience that's out there today, that I started to understand what was really going on in my brain when I grew up and how I built that resilience. And why we have so many kids today who don't have resilience and what they're missing out on.
Sure. What is the differentiating factor? Because when I think about it, I think there are a lot of students, a lot of kids growing up who can relate to the feeling of insecurity that you experienced.
Yeah.
What are they not accessing that they need access to?
There's 2 things. Number 1 is parenting culture. Number 2 is technology. Those are the 2 main factors in the lower resilience among youth and young adults today. So parents are told that they're supposed to eliminate all difficulty from a kid's life, right? It's like if they are bullied at school, what does a parent do today?
They probably want to stop it.
They call the school. They say, so-and-so's bullying my kid. I want you to stop it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there was this really awesome episode of the Andy Griffith Show. I don't know if you or if anybody even out there really remembers the Andy Griffith Show, but sure. It's this amazing classical Americana TV show. And in this episode, he has a son named Opie that's 5 or 6 years old, and he experiences a bully. Mm-hmm. And he even comes home with a black eye. I mean, wow. It was a physical bully, sure. Not just somebody who's saying mean things to him, but actually, hurt him. And instead of the dad marching over to the parents' house and saying, your son hurt my son, and blah, 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 right? He teaches Opie to stand up for himself. He says, the bullies, they thrive on fear. They want you to be afraid. And really, when you learn how to stand up for yourself and face that fear, it no longer has power over you. And so you see this interaction with Opie, this little 6-year-old kid, standing up to this bully, and it changes everything, his confidence level goes up, his, all that fear is wiped away. And so this is a major, major difference in today's parenting culture versus my parents' and my grandparents' parenting culture. It was a lot more stay out of your kid's life, give them advice and give them encouragement, but let them fix their own problems. Let them face their fears. And so I've even found it so difficult in today raising kids that there aren't really that many difficult things in life. We're getting to the point where we're saying, I can do hard things means basic things, like hold a job, like talk to the cash register at the cashier at the store, right? Sure. I can do hard things like sleeping outside under the stars. Mm-hmm. These are things that mankind has done for thousands of years, mm-hmm. and we're calling them hard things.
Yeah, it's certainly, there is a shift, and I can't speak to it the same as you can because my perspective is different. I was born into it.
Yeah.
I was speaking the other day, got to talk with a therapist who shared about how oftentimes parents, what they want to do is they'll provide a lot of empathy for what their children are going through, but no confidence in their child. Yeah. And he talked about how it's important to have a balance of empathy and confidence.
Yeah.
So instead of, oh my goodness, that's so horrible, let me see if I can fix it, it's, oh my goodness, that is so horrible, and I totally have confidence in you to solve that problem, find a solution for yourself. And just confidence without empathy, by the way, that doesn't work too well either.
Right.
Because your child could come to you and say, Dad, this is going on, and you say, oh, you got it. You got it. You'll find a way.
He's like, no, I really
exactly.
hurt.
Yeah. And so empathy and confidence, that combination, I believe can be really powerful, and I believe that connects to what you're speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the second point that I mentioned earlier, the technology end of it.
Yeah.
This is the other major component because of two major reasons. Number one is the comparison factor. Mm-hmm. Okay? We live in this world now where everything is sensationalized and overly dramatic. Everything is the most, the dramatic, the biggest, best. In order for it to be relevant, it has to be the most, right? And so we get conditioned to seeing everything as the most, so that when we are faced with just kind of our mundane everyday life, we start to think that there's something wrong with us, mm-hmm. because we're not experiencing the most all the time, right? And so then what do? When we're in our mundane, boring life?
We'd probably turn to our phone where it's the most.
Exactly. You flip out that phone, and especially when the social media platforms invented the endless scroll, mm-hmm. that's where they really hooked us. See, because before, most web pages had an end or a bottom of the page, right?
Yeah.
And you'd come to the end, and then you'd have to decide, well, where do I want to navigate next?
That is really interesting. I've never considered that.
And the reason why this is so dangerous is because what they did was they exploited the dopamine neurofeedback loop. Okay, so what that means is in your brain, you have these different neural receptors, right? And dopamine is a natural hormone that the body produces.
It's a drug.
And it's a short-term reward hormone. There's actually a very normal and healthy amount of dopamine that your body should receive every day.
Yeah.
And it gets it out of anticipation, right? So when you're anticipating something, then you get a little hit of dopamine, okay? And when they invented that endless scroll, every time you scroll, you're anticipating what's going to come up next, right? So you get that little hit of dopamine. But it fades out really fast. And so you want a little bit more, and you want a little bit more, and you have this unending supply of dopamine in your hand, okay? Now, unfortunately, what we're really craving, our bodies are really craving, is connection.
Right.
Okay, and all of the platforms, all of the technology promise connection. In fact, connection is such a buzzword, it kind of starts to bug me because technology really is the counterfeit to connection. There's another neurotransmitter called oxytocin, which is this long-term happy reward hormone. It's what you get when we get this, right? Yeah. You and I sitting here face to face, eye to eye, having a conversation. You have a deep conversation. Our bodies are creating oxytocin.
Yeah.
But for everybody who's watching us right now, they're interacting it with us through a screen. And our bodies, we can actually measure the amounts of oxytocin in your bloodstream as you're engaging in different activities. And we've found that your body doesn't create any oxytocin when you're watching or interacting a person through the screen.
Wow.
You create dopamine. And so, the oxytocin is what you come away with from that feeling going, oh man, that was such an awesome episode. I got to film.
Love talking with Joe. And exactly.
And you're like, live on this high for, weeks. You're thinking back about it and you're like, oh, that was great. But let me ask you this. How many of the last posts that you interacted with on Facebook are you like, oh wow, that was really awesome?
Yeah, it's not the same effect.
It's so short term and just like gone. There may be one or two that like stand out in your memory, but you're not like
the ones that do stand fulfilled. Out. As I look back when you asked that question, the ones that do stand out either prompted me to do something without my phone, or they were some kind of depiction of an oxytocin moment like the one you described. Someone else engaging
real
in
emotion, a deep human connection.
Sure.
Because that's what we crave. In fact, our bodies crave that so much. There was this really terrible study done back in the 40s where they were trying to determine what it is about human interaction that's so important. And so they had a sample of 40 newborn babies at a hospital. And they said, okay, half of these babies, we're going to give them normal care in the nursery where the nurses hold them and feed them and rock them and comfort them and stuff, right? And the other 20 babies, we're not going to give them any of that additional human interaction. We'll feed them, we'll change them, but just if they're crying, just let them be there. Don't interact with them. And the reason it's such a terrible study is that half of those babies died like within the first week. And then there were another like 4 or 5 that died later on from effects of the study. So it was this horrible outcome, but this amazing finding that humans are hardwired to need real eye-to-eye, face-to-face human interaction.
Yeah.
And that doesn't stop at childhood. Your whole life, your body is going to crave real, in-person human interaction.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing those insights. This, to me, is kind of an interesting crossroads. Part of the reason that I started this podcast is because in my middle school years and in my youth, I struggled with feelings of depression. And I struggled to build that resilience. And, of course, we all still struggle, and I still do. It's part of the journey of progress.
Absolutely.
But this crossroads is interesting to me because so many of the resources that helped me to rise out of that place, I gained access to them. They were facilitated through technology.
Yeah.
And so it's important when parents want to provide their children an opportunity to build resilience. It's hard to say whether they should totally cut off technology and make sure their children don't suffer with isolation, or whether maybe some exposure is necessary for that resilience. What would you say about that?
Absolutely. So there's the best way to use technology in healthy ways is what we talk about, the difference between creation and consumption.
Sure.
Okay. When you're creating with technology, and as you can see, I work with technology all day.
Yeah.
It's a very stimulating process to your brain. And in fact, you can see like both hemispheres of the brain are being used, and in all different areas of the brain. But when we consume, then you can see all the electrical synapse diminish to just that emotional midbrain, and it becomes very numbing.
Sure.
Very numbing.
That's when the dopamine is just flooding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I've raised my kids so far, our 4 oldest who've been through high school and are currently in high school, they don't have smartphones. And the reason why is because we want them to connect with humans in a real way. And so everybody's like, well, how do they get in touch with their friends, The same way I did. We have a landline at home that they call, and they coordinate going to hang out. And people are like, oh, well, especially my oldest, Mason, he was like, my friends won't they won't answer me. They won't pick up the phone and talk to me. And I was like, well, you'll find out real quick who your friends are.
Yeah.
How many friends do you really need? You know what studies show?
I'm curious. How many?
1.
Wow.
All you need is 1 really good friend, a real friend who is there for you in time of need. That's all you really need. And see, the thing is with social media and stuff, we conflate the value of friends with these numbers of I've got 1,400 Facebook friends, right? But how many of those friends can I call in a pinch and they'll be there for me? Very, very little. I could probably think of 3, and one of them is probably my neighbor right across the street.
Yeah. It'd be way more effective walk across the street than text him on Facebook.
Yeah. So there's the difference is that you really need that one good close friend, and you're not going to develop it through technology. You're going to develop it through real life conversation, deep interaction. And the reason is because when we're looking at the difference of the levels of communication, right? Our most connecting type of communication that we have is eye-to-eye, face-to-face discussion. Okay. Your next level down is the telephone.
Sure.
Where you're actually talking on the phone, because you get a lot of the nonverbals.
Yeah.
You don't get all of them. When you were visual, you see all the body language that goes along with it, right? But when you're on the phone, you get tonality, you get timing, you get all these different things that add to the communication. Then you take it down another step to texting or email. And that's where there's so much miscommunication because you don't get all those nonverbals, right? And so we teach our kids, elevate your communication. At every opportunity you have, elevate your communication. If you're on the phone with somebody for 15 minutes to an hour or whatever, just say, hey, why don't we hang out? How about I come over to your house, you come over to my house, let's actually hang out. And they build these deeper, more meaningful friendships.
Yeah, what a different experience that would be. I feel like probably the number one struggle with young people today is isolation.
Yeah.
And so, anything that can help us to facilitate that human connection, even if it results from listening to this podcast, and maybe after you watch this episode and hear some of these things we're sharing, it inspires you to take action, to reach out to somebody and have a in-person conversation with them.
There's an interesting study that shows that 1 day of isolation has the same negative impact on your longevity as smoking 16 cigarettes.
I've heard about this. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It actually affects your lifespan.
Yeah.
So you think about how many kids, And what does isolation mean? It's basically where you're not interacting eye to eye, face to face with somebody.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, we're on Minecraft, or we're playing, whatever game in the basement with the lights out and my headset on. Sorry, guys, that's not the same. You're not creating oxytocin that way.
Right.
It's all dopamine. And so it really does take that human interaction to build that resilience.
Yeah. I'm curious if we could rewind to something you mentioned earlier about resilience. I think there are a lot of well-meaning parents out there who might be listening. Yeah. When they heard you say that, their heart just, oh, you mean I'm not going to rescue my baby? Or, something along those lines. Maybe you could provide an example of when you've known that bridge was crossed and you needed to intervene in some certain way, or you knew it was okay that you could let your child handle it on their own.
Okay, I think this was a little more instinctive for me because of my difficult upbringing, like my crossed eyes and my resilience from being a little kid. So that when we had our first kid, when he would fall, the natural instinct of the mother is to go and comfort.
Sure.
Right? And he was my son, and so I was looking at him, I was like, okay, there's a boy, like I guess I can relate to him more or whatever. I want him to be tough and strong and all this manly stuff, right? Which, again, a lot of people are like, oh, that's toxic masculinity, right? No, actually, the man has a much different chemical makeup than the woman, and they serve complementary roles, not competing, right?
Absolutely.
They're complementary. And so while my wife would be like really instinctively want to go down there and comfort him, I'd hold her back and I'd go, just hold on a second. See if he gets up. Let's just see if he gets up. And he would get up, and if he'd whimper a little bit, he'd be like, oh, and I'd go, okay, come on over, buddy. I'd give him a little hug and look him in the eye, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Okay, go play. Right? And the difference is do we jump in and coddle first, or do we let the child assess their own resilience first? Okay, so it starts as young as a toddler age.
Yeah, that's a really interesting response, because one thing I note in what you shared is it's maybe not a difference of how we respond, but the timing in which we respond.
Yeah.
That could mean the difference.
And a kid needs both. Like you said, they need empathy and confidence.
Yeah.
Right? And it's different for my daughters. Mm-hmm. Like my daughters, they needed a lot more empathy. Mm-hmm. And so you comfort them a little bit more. And you even maybe follow up with them after you're like, you okay? You sure okay? Is your head okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then they're good, right? But it's just that parenting culture has shifted that so that we coddle first and actually don't really express any confidence in them. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's when you coddle them, like instinctively, like they fall and you go pick them up before they like even cry, you've told them that I don't trust that you're safe in this world. You need me. And really what that starts to do over the years is it develops a codependent relationship between parent and child to where we've got now 52% of young adults ages 18 to 28 are living at home, not going to work or school. So a majority of young adults today are what we would call failure to launch. 28 years old, still living at home, not going to school or not holding a job. By the time I was 28 years old, because I was raised in such a resilient culture, I had a house and 3 kids, and I was like on my way.
Wow. Because
my parents expressed a ton of confidence in me as a young man, as a child, and just said, you can go tackle the world, go get it, mm-hmm. Go get whatever it is you want. You can get it. You just have to work for it.
Yeah. That is, once again, just another nuance of our modern day. And I think maybe there's an economic factor to that as well, but that's kind of part of the mix. Is economic resilience is something we need to develop as well. For you, you've been able to develop a lot of self-reliance and freedom economically, but I'm sure that was a journey for you.
Oh, yeah.
What wisdom would you share with somebody who is seeking that.
Oh, okay. Oh, I got lots of good stuff.
Yeah, no, it's clear you have so much good to share.
Well, I love talking about this because I really connect with young adults. Like, being young in your 20s is like the most exciting time of your life because you're just like conquering the world. I remember when we were first married, I looked at my wife and I was like, okay, we're building our kingdom. Everything we do right now is going to pay off in 20 years. But it's going to take 20 years before we really realize those payoffs.
And that's your mindset at 21 and 19?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so what that looked like is I had to kind of talk about this with Mason just the other day. Because he was talking about he's working 2 jobs, going to school, he's busting his butt out there. Mm-hmm. And he said something in this way. He said, I'm having to support myself through college. And I stopped him and I said, whoa, hold on a sec. I want to challenge that statement for a second. When you say, I'm having to support myself, it kind of comes off as maybe a victim mentality. Like maybe your parents aren't rich enough to provide for you, to let you go to school and not have to work while you're going to school. And I said, I could actually pay for you going to school right now.
Yeah.
But my grandparents worked their way through college. My parents worked their way through college. I worked my way through college, and I want to give you that same blessing. I unfortunately knew I had some roommates who came to college with daddy's credit card.
Sure.
And I was not surprised to see how less committed they were to their studies, how they didn't have to work and played a lot and partied a lot, and their life went in a much different, less progressing manner. And because I was also working my way through college, I was on a maybe a faster track towards independence.
Sure.
And self-reliance. Mm-hmm. So sometimes just in the way that we represent those concepts, like, am I having to support myself or am I working my way through college? Guess what? When you graduate from college and you're getting a job with, you're interviewing with potential employers, they like to see that you have worked your way through college. And why? Because when you get a salary job, you're not expected to just work 40 hours a week. 40 hours a week is kind of like the minimum of adult life. Most really successful businessmen that I know put in 50 to 60 hours a week to get where they want to be. And that seems like a lot, but when you're doing 12-hour days, 5 days a week, that's 60 hours. And it's very doable. And I did that as a young man, as a self-employed young man. You think, it's funny, people think when you're self-employed, like you don't ever work, right?
It's the total opposite, yeah.
It's like you're always working.
My boss gets after me because it's me. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was going to school full-time. I worked full-time. I had three kids at the time.
Yeah.
4 kids, I guess, when I was doing my undergrad. And, balancing that with church and family life. Again, like I said, I always wanted to be a dad, right? Mm-hmm. So I chose the entrepreneur lifestyle because I wanted to be there as much as I could for my kids.
Yeah.
While I was having to work such long hours. And the amazing thing is, like, I've been able to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my family for my entire life.
Wow.
Like, I've always been there for meals.
Yeah.
And for sure there's weekends or nights that I was gone, but regularly I was there for them.
Meals are such an important time for that face-to-face bonding as well.
Absolutely.
Like, that's humans connecting over food is really primal thing as well.
It is, and it only takes like 20 or 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. But again, that's where technology kind of gets in the way. A lot of people like to turn on the TV during dinner.
Sure.
But that tradition of family dinner has been one of the most bonding and connecting elements of our family culture.
Yeah.
And it's not any it's not any like new thing. It's just like what our grandparents did and what my parents did. And so I was like, I think I'm going to stick with what proved to work.
Yeah.
You know?
That's really powerful. Well, we have whiplash from listening today because I've turned a lot of sharp corners to talk about different topics, but there's just so much good to learn from your experiences and your work.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And really, I don't claim to have any like new ideas for myself. It's just we're counterculture because we go with what the previous generations did. Right? We stuck with the wisdom of the ages. And it has proven to be very, very successful. And especially in like people, I got to tell this story.
Sure.
People look at us like we're rich. Okay? And we're not. As far as the world's concerned, like the amount of money that I make is about what a brand new college grad will make coming right out of school. You know, like the average college grad will come out making around $70,000 to $80,000 a year.
Yeah.
And people look at us as though we're like super rich because, you know, we have this, you know, big 3,500 square foot home. We've got a boat. We go to Lake Powell every year on a houseboat. And, you know, I drive a convertible and, you know, I have all these like signs of wealth, you know, like we have a swimming pond in our backyard. But what they don't see is how the self-reliance principles got us there step by step. What they're seeing is the end result of 20 plus years.
Yeah. Right. Of a 21-year-old, 19-year-old saying, let's build our kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah. And for like the first 15 years of our marriage, I drove a Toyota Corolla. Mm-hmm. I drove the tires off that thing several times.
Yeah.
You know, I think it had 240,000 miles when I sold it.
That's what my car's got out here.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
That's a depreciating asset.
Right.
There's no reason to be driving a nice car when you're a young adult. Mm-hmm. Because it's a depreciating asset. It's not building you anything.
Yeah.
So you get as cheap as you can and as reliable as you can.
Sure. So you just buy it once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a good rule of thumb for that for me is $1,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Okay, if I buy a $4,000 car, I want it to last for 4 years. And you can. Most $4,000 cars will last that long. And if you like convertibles, get a convertible because there's a really great market for used convertibles, right? Like right now I'm driving a Mitsubishi Eclipse convertible. And, you know, rich guys don't want to drive the 10-year-old convertible.
Yeah.
And they lose their value super fast. Mm-hmm. So then a guy like me comes along and says, I don't mind driving a 10-year-old car. And I buy it for, you know, $5,000-$6,000. And I drive it for 5 or 6 years and it works great.
Yeah.
And all the time people are like, wow, you're the richest guy I know. And I say, you know what? I am the richest guy I know, but not by standards of money, but in standard of living. And you can create a really, really great lifestyle on $70,000 a year.
Yeah, that speaks to me of priorities.
Yeah.
There's certain things that you sacrifice that others might not notice, but it's clear that family and experiences with your family is something that's not up for discussion. That's what we're going to spend our money on, and our time and our effort. And
it's not just me, it's my wife.
Yeah.
You know, we are hand in hand on this endeavor. For example, our food budget. Mm-hmm. All right. We feed a family of
You feed 11 an army. You feed an army. Yeah.
On $500 a month.
Wow.
And we eat like kings. Mm-hmm. I'm not kidding you. Like my wife will make stromboli. She'll make, you know, chicken a la king another night. She'll make Toscana soup. She'll make, you know, this amazing chicken Alfredo. Mm-hmm. And it's all from scratch. You know, she shops according to whatever is the best value. So like we wanted to bake our own bread for a while, try to be like Provident living in that. But we actually found that buying bread is cheaper than making bread. So we buy bread.
Yeah.
Right. But making pasta versus buying pasta, you got to buy the pasta. It's cheap.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. But we do things that are just provident and let us live a really great lifestyle without breaking the bank. Most households spend $500 to $600 a month just on snacks.
Whoa.
So like, there was a little Facebook message going around the neighborhood a little while ago. Somebody asked about what do you spend on your grocery bill, and it came down to this discussion. And really, what it was is these snacks. When like you want to give your kid a snack when they come home from school, most parents buy fruit snacks, right? Guess what we do? We cut up an apple and give them a fruit snack, like a real one, and it's way cheaper,
better for you.
Way better for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has to do with like my wife has learned how to not just learn. I think she strives to be like really provident in her living, so that we can enjoy these other nice things like the boating trips and like the pond in our backyard. By the way, right? This was another resilience building principle. You asked, how do you give your kids resilience? And I mentioned that don't pick them up too early. Well, this was a lesson for our teenagers because they need a lot of resilience as a teenager. And what it is they just don't know like the limits of their physical capability.
Sure.
So I had this grand idea. I was like, let's build a pond in our backyard that we can swim in. And we're going to dig the hole with shovels and buckets.
Wow.
I'm not going to go get the excavator. I could have rented the excavator. But that wasn't the point. People asked me it took us 4 years to build it.
Yeah, I'm sure you hit some rock in St. George Desert.
Yeah, it was, not kidding you, it was clay. And so we had to buy like a jackhammer hammer drill,
loosen
it up and haul it off. Right? And people would ask, when are you going to be done building your pond? I'm like, I'm not building a pond. I'm building strong children. I want them to experience difficulty and the bounds of their physical capabilities, because that will give them confidence when they are, working 30 hours a week at restaurants, at college, while going to school full time, and while trying to juggle that with a social life.
Yeah.
They'll go, man, I'm tired. But sure not as tired as when I was digging that hole in the backyard.
I've done things before that I thought were impossible until I did them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for what you've shared. Invitation, as we conclude today, maybe I'll just share what I'm taking from our time together is how essential it is that we quickly translate the information that we consume into action.
Yeah.
And whatever you might access through, the wondrous tools of this day and age, it's only going to benefit you if you go back to something that has existed forever, which is a connection with another human being. And I believe actually that some of the tools that we have, and maybe you've experienced this in your career, they can facilitate connection like we've never seen before. And you can capture those moments of a wedding, and you can remember them in a way that our great-grandparents maybe couldn't. And they just have a black and white snapshot of that. And we were able to really capture the moment and share it in another way. And so at the conclusion of this, I would be pleased if each of you make an effort to reach out to somebody in your life. Particularly maybe somebody else who's feeling isolated or who needs it. So thank you for the light you've shed on that subject.
Well, and my invitation would be to all the listeners out there, reach out to your parents. Because I really didn't appreciate it as a young adult, a young adult.
Yeah.
Really how much parents do for us. Until probably I was, in my 30s and was already giving that kind of care for my kids. And I was thinking, man, I hope someday my kids will care enough to, want to hang around me when they're older. When I don't have to put up with their little kidness anymore, And one of my greatest honors is that, my adult children, when they want to hang out with me, when they want to do activities with me or spend time with me. And it's kind of one of those like payback moments for the years and years of sacrifice and investment. And there's no like guarantee on that investment. You know, a lot of kids don't feel that close connection with their parents until sometimes it's too late.
Yeah.
And a little bit of wisdom in your 20s and 30s to connect with your parents will pay off dramatically in your fulfillment in life in your later years. So
yeah, I have to ask, are your parents still with us?
Yeah, they are.
I'm sure they're real proud of you, the work you're doing.
They say so. I hope so. I try to make them proud.
Yeah.
And like the other night, I was at my dad's house for Thanksgiving, and he said, "Thanks for all you do," and I said, "Thanks for all you do, Dad." And honestly, it feels really trite for me to say, "Thanks for all you do." I hope I don't just say that, but I hope I show it.
Yeah.
And he looked me in the eye and he said, "You do." And I really appreciate that. And that was a great moment for me to realize, like, paying it forward.
Yeah.
You know.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you all for engaging with us today on another episode of the Progress Podcast. I hope you'll find progress and purpose in your life as you apply the things we've talked about today with Joe Newman.
Thanks.
Thank you.